Hello everybody, it's Kara from Wild Book Garden, and today I'm here to talk about my favorite contemporary books that I read in 2023, and content warnings will be listed in the description box as well, and any links I mention. So, I have 7 books to talk about, and I think all of them, or most of them, I think all of them are ones that I haven't really heard many other people talk about, if anybody. Number 7 is Honestly Elliott by Gillian McDunn, and also a lot of these you'll be able to tell probably are from like projects that I did, like reading vlog projects, which makes me extra happy that I participated in those. So anyway, Honestly Elliott. Elliott, of course, is our main character. He is a young, I think he's like 12-year-old, 12 or 13-year-old boy. And he has ADHD, and he also really, really loves cooking, and he's really good at it. And that's something where, because of the way that his brain works, because he has ADHD, he actually really thrives in the kind of like multitasking, paying attention to multiple things, like all of that aspect that goes into cooking. So he loves it and he's really good at it. But at the beginning of the book, there is a bit of an accident in the kitchen. And so his parents are, not super thrilled with that. His class gets paired up to work on like projects, and he gets paired with this girl who he finds out later that she has celiac disease, and so that of course affects, like, she can't have gluten, and so that affects what they are doing for their project, because they want to do something like cooking or baking related, and so we see the two of them like become friends and start to sort of like talk about and ask about each other's like different perspective and different experience, and it's done in a way that feels so natural to the story, while also being such a great example for kids. So there's a lot of other things that I think this book touches on in a way that I really love, that are not necessarily like the main focus, but are given the attention they need. Like, for example, the friend that he ends up making, by the way, I'm not going to be, there's going to be a lot of character names that I don't remember, so it does not mean I didn't love the book. It's just how it goes sometimes. So anyway, the friend that Elliott makes, she talks about like just a little bit about what it's like having a disease that other people like don't believe exists, and also how the like no gluten or gluten-free sort of fad has actually kind of like made it more difficult for her to have this condition. Like, there are more foods available that are gluten-free, but the way people treat her, the way people view what she deals with as something that isn't a medical necessity, like she talks about that in a way that I think is really good. There's also some really great discussion of like the way that baking is viewed versus like cooking, like more serious, like chef and everything like that. There's some really wonderful family interactions, and I just really loved Elliott as a main character. I loved seeing him grow and like start to, like meet new people, but also like kind of reconnect with like some of his family that he already knows. Like, this is just such a really lovely story. The ending, I think, is really emotional in like the best way. I also loved the sort of historical element that was part of this book, because the two kids end up using that as part of their inspiration for their like project, and it's just such a great example of some of the many things that I love about middle grade and about like middle grade contemporary. Number 6 is Simon Sort of Says by Erin Boehm. This is a really, really heavy like intense one. There are several books on this list that I definitely would, caution about recommending, but I do think it is a fantastically written story. So our main character is Simon. His father is, I think, a deacon in the Catholic Church, and so he and his father and his mother all are moving to this new town for his dad to take a job there. And we also know that there are other reasons for this move. Simon thinks it is going to be a relief to move to this town because it happens to be the place where I think it might be like the SETI project or like something sort of similar to that. Like, there's a lot of like space program and like using like radar or sonar, that kind of thing. So because of that, there's a lot of restrictions on the kind of like technology you can use. And so there's basically no internet. And so that really affects the way that this community gets like their news. And we find out pretty quickly that that is really important to Simon and to his family, because we learn that Simon is the only survivor in his class of a school shooting. And so this is probably obvious that this takes place in America, because that is the only place in the world that this could happen and not change anything. But it is such a well-told story. As I said, it is very heavy. Like, we don't see the violence itself happen, but we do get flashbacks. We see, obviously, the trauma, the toll that it takes on Simon to be a survivor of this atrocity. And we also see how that has affected his parents and how it has affected the way that they interact with new people and just like live their everyday lives. And so all of that is, of course, incredibly harrowing, and very emotional, very heavy. But it's weird to say this, but this book also is really, really funny. Like, there are so many moments of humor, especially when Simon ends up making friends with this girl who lives in this town. Like, their interactions, like, there's a really kind of shocking amount of humor and joy in this book for being a book that is so much about grief and trauma and this very particular kind of violence. So again, I don't recommend it lightly, but I think it is kind of amazing in the way that it also balances out those emotions. I think the way this book deals with grief and with this trauma is so compassionate. I think the feelings Simon has of survivor's guilt are explored in a way that is so tender, and it feels very realistic. I also loved Simon and his family, and again, there's a lot of humor there as well, like the way that they interact with each other and just like their observations about the world. I love Simon as a main character. Of course, I felt for him so much about what he had gone through. And this is one on the list that I am almost positive I would not have read if not for a vlog project, because I don't tend to pick up stories about things like mass shootings, because I am American, so I get to see those on the news all the time. And I don't really want to deal with that in fiction as well. So I almost am positive that I wouldn't have picked this up, but I'm really glad that I did. Number 5 is The Sea in Winter by Christine Day. Christine Day is an author who I just think is very underrated in general, and I prioritized this book when I did because my friend Annalisa Ely picked it for my 12 Books, 12 Friends challenge, and this one we are following our main character, who I think her name is Maisie, I want to say. I should mention also that Christine Day is an Indigenous author, and her main characters are as well. So Maisie is our main character, and we know from the beginning of the book that she's been in ballet for years and years, and she loves it. This is like the most important thing that she does. It is something she is passionate about and that like brings her joy, and it's a huge part of her life. And we find out very early on that she actually had a really bad injury. That means that she can't dance for the foreseeable future, and they don't really know if she's going to be healed enough to dance ever. And so that is devastating for her. And what this book really deals with is depression and similar kinds of like mental illness in preteens, like in young kids. Like, we tend to think of certain kinds of mental health, like difficulties or illnesses, as being things that like teens and older deal with, but that's not the case. That's not always true. And I think it is so important that we are seeing stories that show that like kids can have these things happen too, and it is not their fault, and it is not like their parents' fault. Like, nobody is at fault here. It's just something that you deal with as best as you can, with the support of people around you. And so that's what we see Maisie doing throughout the story. Her and her family end up going on a sort of like road trip, a family vacation, and Maisie doesn't understand why she is so upset all the time, like why she gets angry more easily, why she just feels like she's not all there, like she's not connecting with people and with the world in the way that she wants to and that she usually does. I feel like I have said this about all the books on this list, but I really, really love Maisie's family. I love how dedicated they are to being there for her, and how they don't always get things right, but both them and Maisie start to learn that you won't always get things right, but that doesn't mean that you can't be there for somebody. And I mentioned when I first reviewed this book that one of the things that made it hit very personally for me is that I somewhat recently had to give up theater for health and pandemic reasons, and it has been incredibly difficult. Even though my experience and Maisie's experience are different, it felt really validating and very emotional to see a character deal with something kind of similar, where you are grieving the loss of something that it isn't a person. And so it can be hard to explain to people or hard to show why it matters so much, but you are like grieving like a piece of yourself. And it just really resonated with me. So in addition to all of the like writing things that I think this book did well, just on a personal level, I also really loved it and it really hit me hard. Number 4 is Hummingbird by Emily Lloyd. This is a mostly contemporary, which is why it's on this list, but there is a tiny bit of almost magic, or possibly fabulism, and our main character is a girl who is a wheelchair user. That is not something that she emotionally really struggles with. Like, she is happy, she is fulfilled, her family, again, are wonderful, but because of, I think it's brittle bone disease that she has, her parents are understandably very protective about her going places and doing things, and one aspect of that is that she hasn't ever been to public school. She's been homeschooled, and she just really wants to make friends. She wants to know kids her own age, and so finally she is able to convince her parents to let her give this a try, and she does. She's such a vivacious and like wonderful like person. Like, she has so much like love and joy to give, and so seeing her get to meet more people where she can do that, she can share that, is really lovely. And then there is this sort of legend in the place where she lives that there is a hummingbird that will appear on a certain night, and if you find it, you can make a wish. And our main character sort of gets it into her head that she can maybe wish away her illness. And one of the things that I think this book does that I think is really important is it shows how you can be a person who is very at peace with some aspect of your identity or your experience, whether that is a disability or something else. But that doesn't mean that every day is easy, or that doesn't mean that you don't struggle. It doesn't mean that you might not have a day where something happens that makes you wish that you didn't have this, that you didn't have to deal with this, that you didn't have to constantly explain yourself to people and things like that. I also really adored the writing in this one. It is like very bright and vibrant, and the main character's personality comes through so perfectly. Like, she's one of my favorite characters I've read recently. Like, I think I even put her on my favorite characters list on Goodreads because I love her so much. I would love to be friends with her. I loved seeing her make friends with other people. And again, I think that the portrayal of her like sort of internal journey, it was handled with so much care and love. And like acceptance, and like that this is normal to feel like this. And this is yet another book on this list that was part of a vlog project, as is number 1 on this list actually. But going to number 3, I have Rules for Being a Girl by Candace Bushnell and Katie Katugno. So in this one, we are following a teen girl who she has this English teacher at her school who is basically everybody's favorite. He's very young, he's very charming, he's funny, he's clever, he's very friendly, you know, like he's like the cool teacher that all the like teens want to like hang out with and everything. And he is, like I said, basically everybody's favorite teacher, including for our main character. And then one day she ends up alone with him and he forcibly kisses her. And immediately she is like, this is not right. Like, this should not have happened. And so she decides that she's going to report it because this is wrong and this man should face consequences for the way that he is preying on kids. And the school does an absolutely horrible job of like listening to her or acting on this in any way, which unfortunately is very realistic for a lot of places. But our main character decides that she's not going to give up on that, that she is going to keep seeking some kind of justice for what happened to her and preventing this from happening to other kids. So again, I feel like a lot of contemporaries that I love, I talk about like balance of like tone and emotion, because this is another one where that determination and that like seeking of justice, I think that is balanced out with a very realistic look at how, even though our main character is so strong in her convictions and so determined and so like she knows what happened to her and she knows it was wrong, but because of the way that some people respond to her telling what happened, she sometimes has moments where she doubts herself. Like, there are people who are gaslighting her in a way that encourages her to gaslight herself. And so even though I love that this book is so centered on this girl like getting some consequences for this man, for what he did to her and for what he has done or could do to others. I love that the book has that emphasis and that sort of tone and feeling, but I also appreciate that it has that element of like, this is what you are saying when you question somebody, when you question a victim story like this. And this is what it can do. This is what it can make them feel. This is how people can can doubt their own reality, which is like, the definition of gaslighting. So I think that balance was done really well. I also found this a really compelling and quick read. Like, I think I read this in basically 1 or 2 sittings. Like, I could not put it down because I was so wrapped up in our main character and in wanting to see her get some kind of justice. Something else I think the book does really well is show how our main character, who I think her name was Marin or something similar, how this, like, having this happen to her makes her start to pay attention or admit to herself all of the other misogyny that she has just grown up with and has like accepted about like her school and just like her, society in general. And I think to me that actually felt very realistic, because I think for some people that is the way it happens. I just think this was really, really fantastic. And this is an example of a book that deals with like rape culture and sexual harassment, sexual violence, but in a way that is, appropriate to like younger readers who might be reading this. But also I think it is just important in general for books that deal with heavy topics like this to have a range of, tones, or a range of like how specific or how explicit it is about these things. Number 2 on my list is It Sounds Like This by Anna Mariano, one of my favorite authors. I love her middle grade fantasy. I love her young adult contemporaries. I just love her as a writer. And this one it follows the sister of the main character from her previous contemporary, but you can definitely read this one and still enjoy it. I think there are certain like characters or relationships that you are going to be more invested in if you have read This Is How We Fly, but you definitely can read this one separately as well. So we are following Yasmin, and she is very certain that this is going to be her year. She's like a sophomore or junior, I think. This was set after an especially bad hurricane hit Texas and kind of like ruined the rest of her school year. And so she is like determined that this is going to be different, that this year is going to be better. She has all these plans for how her and her best friend are going to be in marching band together. Yasmin is going to be, I think, first flute, and she's like, this is going to happen. This is what my classes are going to be like. And of course, things don't go according to plan. And one of the big things that happens is that right at the beginning of the school year, Yasmin actually reports a sexual harassment incident that she witnesses. The entire like brass section of the marching band gets suspended, and so they can't participate in band or in any of the competitions. And so even though Yasmin was doing the right thing, the entirety of the band class for the most part is like really angry at her, and so she sort of gets like guilted into joining the like new brass section that they're having to cobble together, even though flute is not brass. It's very different. And so she gets kind of thrown in with a bunch of these other kind of like rowdy like freshman and sophomore boys for the most part, and so it's about trying to get themselves into some semblance of a functioning band section, but it's also about the friendships that she makes with, in some of these like unlikely cases. And I really loved seeing that sort of found family aspect. There also is like a little tiny smidge of romance because Yasmin has, like, she's had a crush on this one guy in her class for ages, but she is spending a lot of time with somebody else, and that is making her start to like question how she feels about that. And also this book deals, I think, really well with like social media bullying. There are parts of this that are just like infuriating to read because of the way that Yasmin is treated by some of her classmates because of the fact that she was like, hey, sexual harassment is not okay. And I think especially the way that this book deals with toxic friendships, it was really, really well done. And seeing Yasmin like realize that like, oh, this is not how friends are supposed to treat each other, and maybe I deserve better than this. It just made me so happy for her. Yeah, I love the family dynamics. I think Anna Mariano does a really incredible job with family relationships, with friendships, with relationships of all kinds. Like I said, the romance is very minor, but I loved it. I thought it was done really well. And I just... yeah, I feel like Anna Mariano's contemporary books are really underappreciated. Like, I feel like they don't get a lot of attention, or people don't tend to like them. I love them. I just want her to write more of everything. And on a more, like, again, sort of personal note with this book, one thing that I really appreciated, this is not at all a major part of the story, but one thing that I really liked seeing was seeing Yasmin sort of, like, contend with being Catholic and being like believing in certain aspects of what the Catholic Church does and represents and works for, like, helping the poor, welcoming immigrants and refugees and that kind of thing, but then also contending with the incredible harm that the church has done and is doing, and like having that sort of conflict. Like, again, this is a very, very minor part of the plot, but I thought it was done really well, and I really liked seeing that. And finally, number 1 on my list is What Happened to Rachel Riley by Claire Swinarski. And this is another book I would not have read except for a vlog project, and specifically I wouldn't have read this one because I had never heard of it. So I'm really, really glad that I did and that I read it. This is another middle grade, and this is another book that deals with rape culture and sexual harassment and violence against women and misogyny and like all of that in a way that is incredibly mindful of the target audience, which are, you know, younger readers, but also it trusts readers. Like, it doesn't like sugarcoat things. It is honest, but it is also incredibly fierce and hopeful. And I just love this book so much. I loved it at the time, but this is one of those books that just, the longer I am away from it, the bigger of an impact it had. And I just really, really think it is one of the best looks at this specific kind of misogyny, and especially as it relates to like preteen girls and the way that we train girls from such a young age to accept the unacceptable. So our main character is a girl who has just moved to a new town, so she's at a new school, and she seems to like it there. You know, there are some kids that she likes talking with, she likes her teachers and her classes, but the weird thing, there's like one weird thing about this school, and that is that there's this one girl who nobody talks to. Like, none of the other kids, nobody talks to her, nobody sits with her, nobody even acts like she exists. Even like some of the teachers, or like most of the teachers, the way they interact with this girl is just incredibly bizarre. It's like she's invisible, and our main character is like, hey, what's going on? Like, that's not okay. What happened? And nobody wants to tell her. Like, no one wants to tell her what happened to Rachel Riley. And so she decides that she is going to find out, because she immediately is like, this is not okay. Like, this is wrong. I'm going to stand up for this girl I don't know and figure out what happened, and people should not be treated like this. And there's also a little bit of a mixed media element, because this like mystery almost kind of aligns with a like project that the main character is doing, and there's a lot of discussion of like, is this really an ethical project to do? And I think the way it handles that was good as well. But it just gives like a really interesting kind of structure to the book. I loved the main character's voice. I loved her personality and how she was immediately like, I do not know this girl, but I'm going to bat for her. I'm going to figure out what happened. Nobody deserves to be ignored like this. Nobody deserves to be treated like this. And the way that this book explores the way that misogyny and violence against women manifests in such tiny and seemingly, I don't even want to say innocent, but like seemingly innocuous ways, I think is so brilliant. I loved the way this book explored that topic, the way that it highlights how like it is not productive or reasonable to like rank misogyny against each other. Like the way that victims are made to feel like because what they experienced isn't the worst thing that could have happened, that then they are unreasonable for being upset, for finding this unacceptable. Yeah, and this is another book where I'm going to talk about balance, because I just love the way that this book takes these topics so seriously, but in a way that is appropriate for younger readers, but also in a way that is nuanced and deep and can be appreciated by older readers as well. And also, with all of that, this is another book that is very hopeful, very joyful. Like, it is also very fierce, because it is a book about girls standing up for each other and like allyship and like, you know, speaking up for people. And it's just done so beautifully. There are moments of like humor as well. I really love that the main character has, again, a very strong family relationship to fall back on. Like, I love this book. And as I said, it's one that has really like intensified in my feelings the longer I've been away from it. So yeah, those are the contemporary books that I loved most in 2023. And like I said, I think all of them are very underrated. So I hope that you found at least one or two that you're interested in. Thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you soon with another video, and I hope you love the next book you read. Bye!